Well, it's this simple. You've got questions, we've got answers. Let's do it.
It's time for The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Michael Brown is the director of the Coalition of Conscience and president of Fire School of Ministry. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. That's 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Welcome to our Friday edition of The Line of Fire. You've got questions, we've got answers. Michael Brown, absolutely delighted to be with you. The phone lines are open, 866-348-7884. That's 866-348-7884. I want to get to as many calls as I possibly can today. The earlier you call in, the better chance we have of getting to your calls. And I want to talk to you in a moment about a long podcast I did hosted by Elisa Childers earlier this week about NAR, New Apostolic Reformation, dialoguing with Holly Pivec and Doug Gavitt, who have written about this. And I want to talk to you more about that, my impressions in terms of insight we may have gained or may not have gained with that. 866-34-TRUTH, and we are going straight to the phones. Let's start in California. Jonathan, welcome to The Line of Fire.
Dr. Brown, thanks so much for having me today.
Sure thing.
Well, hey, I wanted to just thank you first off for helping bring attention to what's been fighting out here in California, AB 2943. I work with an organization called California Family Council, and I know you've had some of our friends and colleagues, Ann Paulk from the Restored Hope Network and Matt Sharp from Alliance Defending Freedom on. And I just wanted to give your listeners briefly an update. Unfortunately, the bill did pass out of the California Assembly yesterday.
50-18 was the vote. Now,
yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, remarkably.
Now on to, it's state Senate. It is just shocking. I think if people have not been paying attention, they don't realize that one of the states in the nation, the largest state in the nation, is on of criminalizing sexual orientation change efforts. They're on the verge of saying that people of faith who want to help their friends, their family, their children experiencing unwanted same-sex attraction would be barred from doing that. They're on the verge of declaring the gospel itself a fraud and saying that this does not have the power to transform lives. And if you say so, you could be violating the Consumer Protection Act.
Yeah, and my latest article, it's getting out there on a bunch of sites. Will California go from banning religious books to burning them? So, for example, my book, Can You Be Gay and Christian? If a bookstore sold that to someone, maybe you're a parent and you've got a 17-year-old son and he's struggling with unwanted same-sex attraction, and he wants to find out what the Bible says and the possibility of change, and you potentially it could be against the law to sell that book to that person, or for someone, a pastoral counselor, to advocate that, any type of transaction that takes place. If you're a tithing member, let's say you're a tithing member of a church, and as a result of being a tithing member, you get free pastoral counseling, and the pastor's going to help a 30-year-old man who struggles with gender identity confusion, that would become illegal. So it is a frontal assault on religious freedoms. We and many others have been sounding the alarm, and it may take something this draconian and crazy for the California church to wake up. I don't know what it's going to take otherwise.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that there has been a sense, unfortunately, among a lot of people, both in California and around the country, that, look, you know what, if we live and let live, people are operating in good faith. And you remember back during the Proposition 8 campaign 10 years ago, the line that we heard over and over was, well, come on, how will my gay marriage affect, your heterosexual marriage?
Exactly.
And I think we're seeing the actual fruits of that. We're seeing that mere civil unions was never enough. Mere even gay marriage was never enough.
Yep.
We actually heard on the floor of the assembly yesterday, one of the Democrat legislators from the Torrance area basically said, look, you religious people need to evolve with the times. And he went on to cite the California Medical Association, and several other professional groups. I mean, essentially, he didn't all but say it, but essentially his message was, why do you need the Bible when you have all these professional groups saying what you're doing is wrong? And that's just really chilling.
Yeah.
He actually said that the First Amendment does not prohibit us from banning, quote, fraudulent activities, close quote.
So basically, if you have atheists running the show and you say that prayer has a positive impact on people's lives, or that putting your faith in God can give you peace at heart or forgiveness of sins, well, those are all fraudulent claims because there is no God. I mean, there's no limit to how far this type of reasoning can go. Jonathan, when we had Matt Sharp and Ann Polk on the air, we gave out your website specifically. And in my latest article, I linked back to that article as well as to the radio broadcast. So we've been standing with you on the front lines, but just tell our listeners once more where they can go, and especially in California, what they can do.
Well, again, I really appreciate you helping bring awareness to this. We need all the help we can get, both in the state and across the country. People can go to the special website we've set up. We made it really easy. You just go to the name of the bill, AB2943.com, AB2943.com. That directs you specifically to the one page on your website that has the resources for this and the other legislation that's threatening people of faith. And if you go to that website, you can click the sign up button at the top of the page. You'll be signed up for our email list. And you can also directly on that page contact your state senator if you're in the state of California. There is still an opportunity to make your voice heard, both at the legislative level and at the gubernatorial level. I know it sounds crazy that we would be pinning any of our hopes on Governor Moonbeam Jerry Brown, but the reality is that he actually has surprisingly vetoed in the past couple of years. He's vetoed some bills that did threaten religious liberty. So we just need to really activate. And as you said, we need to not trust in princes, but we need to trust in God. But that means that people of faith need to actually step out of the shadows.
Yeah.
They can't stay on the sidelines anymore.
Yeah, I mean, look, and we've had this notion, number one, how does it affect me? Well, that's a selfish question. Aren't we here as God's stewards and representatives and ambassadors, and aren't we concerned about our neighbor and not just ourselves? But of course, it ultimately does affect us. And as I said in my latest article, and by the way, I'm uniquely tied in with this bill because I had dubbed it the Must Stay Gay Bill, and
Yes.
somehow it stuck. So SPLC and Think Progress have now reported on this guy who named it. But I mean, that's what's it went from that it's wrong to be gay or shouldn't be gay or should be in the closet to now you must be. And anything that can help you affirm that, take it on. It is madness. It is insanity. And I said in my article, part of me wants to say, let the whole thing crumble. Maybe then people will wake up. But at what cost to our kids, our grandkids, our nation, our freedoms, our sanity? So give us the website one more time, please.
Sure. Very simple. Just AB2943, AB2943, the name of the bill, .com. And again, we do this, Dr. Brown, not out of what Anthony Kennedy would call a spirit of animus or hatred. We really do this out of love because we believe that the gospel does have the power to transform hearts.
Yes.
Jesus does love everybody.
Yes.
He wants everybody to experience freedom and transformation. And we cannot stay silent. We cannot allow the state of California to hide our light as the church under a bushel.
Got it. All clear. Thank you for your tireless efforts. Ultimately, the gospel will triumph. And friends, so you understand, this is not forcing anyone to do anything. This is allowing people to freely live out their religious and moral convictions, freedom of self-determination. Hey, we will see triumph and victory one way or another. It could take longer than we desire, but let's stand up today and turn the tide. Thank you once more, Jonathan. God bless you.
Thanks, Dr. Brown. God bless.
All right. 866-34-TRUTH. If you still don't know what we're discussing, go to ab2943.com and you'll find out more. And read my latest article about California. Is it going to go from banning religious books to burning religious books? That's at the Ask Dr. Brown website. All right. We go to our friend Chris in Grand Rapids, Michigan. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing fine. I hope you'll be doing okay by the end of this. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
You're a council member of the U.S. Coalition of Apostolic Leaders, and there's an article on the U.S. Cal website by Joseph Matera that calls for a new apostolic reformation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my question, how can you say you don't view yourself as an apostle when you belong to an organization of apostolic leaders? And the next couple questions, how can you say NAR doesn't exist? And how can you say you're not part of NAR when the organization you belong to is calling for a new apostolic reformation?
Yeah, very easy. But great questions. Thanks. First, no, I don't consider myself an apostle. And when Joe Matera took over the organization that was once led by Peter Wagner, and I was never part of it when Peter Wagner led it, the first thing that he did, he said, I won't lead it unless you agree to change the name from apostles to apostolic leaders. So that puts out a wide net of people in different leadership roles. Because I've been a founder and a pioneer and a senior leader over ministries, I've been asked in. But no, I don't consider myself an apostle, and I don't consider everyone in that group. There are hundreds and hundreds of people in that. I don't consider everyone in that group an apostle either, nor does everyone in the group consider themselves. So it's a more broad group with a broad function. That's one. Interestingly, Joe Matera wrote to me earlier this week with his newest article, where he categorically differs with numerous things associated with today's New Apostolic Reformation and wants to come on the air with me to make clear that he and his group do not believe in this and this and this and this and this. So you got three things here. Number one, there was a group that Peter Wagner led and a term that he used, New Apostolic Reformation, that spoke of specific practices and beliefs that I don't hold to and Joe doesn't. We may agree with some, but others, neither of us hold to. That is the alleged worldwide movement that we say doesn't even exist, and people don't even know what you're talking about. That's number one.
Are you still there?
Yeah, so that's number one.
Okay.
Number two, there is what Joe's calling for, which is using similar words, but if you read the substance, calling for something very different. And then three, there's just what's happening in general in the Charismatic Pentecostal Church, the good and the bad, and that somehow all gets put under this rubric of NAR. It's totally ambiguous. I had a discussion with folks about it for 2 hours earlier this week, and I still don't have definition. I still don't know what characterizes an alleged NAR church, because some of the definitions they gave, I said, but here's a website of a major church you claim is NAR, and they deny all of those tenets. So I still don't even know how it's categorized. But interestingly,
right, but
yeah, go ahead. Tell you what, stay right there. All right, I got a break.
Okay,
we'll come back on the other side. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I want to present to you a unique way that you can partner together with me to reach Jewish people with the good news of Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah. Hey, Paul wrote that the gospel is to the Jew first, but many of us don't know how to reach the Jewish people with the gospel. Can I tell you, we have a unique open door, and Jewish people are ready to hear, but we need your help. When I was in Israel recently, my last hour in Jerusalem, about a dozen different people came up to me, and they wanted to thank me for the impact of our message. One Jewish woman came up to me, a believer in Jesus. She said, "You saved my son's life. He was falling away. He was getting pulled by other objections to Jesus. He read your material. He's back in the faith." A young man came up to me. He said he and his Orthodox Jewish friends, here he is, I mean, with the yarmulke, the head covering, the traditional Jewish outfit, he said he and his Jewish friends, his Orthodox friends, watch my debates with rabbis. A few years ago, I was able to lead a Holocaust survivor to faith in Jesus. He was a brilliant man, an atheist who had fled the Holocaust. He read my books on answering Jewish objections to Jesus, came to faith, led his wife to the Lord before they left this world. Friends, we have the resources. We have books ready to be translated in Hebrew to be distributed in Israel. We have our Real Messiah website, unique for reaching Jewish people, Orthodox Jews with the gospel, ready to be translated in Hebrew, ready to do internet campaigns to get into every home in Israel. Every cell phone in Israel can have this message, but we need your help. Every gift to our ministry will literally help us reach another Jewish person with the good news of Jesus the Messiah. Go to AskDrBrown.org. AskDrBrown.org, and when you go there, we will partner together to bring salvation to Israel and the Jewish people. Together, we're making a great difference.
Now is the time to reach the lost sheep of the house of Israel, to share in this end-time harvest of Jewish souls, and to find out how to receive this 2-DVD set, Predestination, Election, and the Will of God Debate. Go to AskDrBrown.org and click the TV banner.
Again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Thanks for joining us on the broadcast, 866-34-TRUTH. You've got questions, we've got answers. Yeah, back to you, Chris. Go ahead.
Okay, so it sounds like they're trying to distance themselves from what was traditionally the NAR, but when I look at the USCal website, the same substance still seems to be there. On their 4-hour vision statement page, it says, "The truth is that politics is the only expression of societal power. We need to influence the world mind-molding sectors of society if we are going to dictate the direction of culture. For example, we need to influence, infiltrate, and control." So dictate, control, infiltrate.
Chris, I can only say that when I had Joe on the air the other day, he brought up that we're not called to take a city, we're called to serve a city. So
I mean,
he's the leader of it. So look, I haven't. Let me be fine. I've never been to the website. Okay, I haven't read I'm there entirely relationally. I know some of the guys. It's a good fellowship, and I've been to maybe one meeting in years. But there's some dear friends I have that are part of it, like Joe Matera, who's a wonderful brother.
But now that you know that they're still using the substance of NAR, just maybe changing the
No, they're not. They're not using the substance. There are plenty of things that they. All right, Chris, you got to listen to me. You got Chris. Okay, listen. I'm trying to. I got a ton of calls. I'm trying to be respectful. You have to. Obviously, you have an agenda, or you want the truth. I'm going to assume you want the truth, so I'm going to help you with the truth. All right. You're parsing every word through this nefarious conspiratorial theory that does not exist. All right, it's that simple. And many of the things that NAR allegedly holds to, or that Peter Wagner espoused, I've never agreed with. Joe Matera doesn't agree with. Most of the people within this organization now don't agree with. So what you need to do is look at the whole. All right, I'm telling you out of the horse's mouth what people believe and practice. Okay, now NAR supposedly believes like all these different things. I still can't get clear definition. I did 2-hour discussion. I still don't have clear definition, because when I went through some of the list and said the people I know don't believe in this, are they part of NAR? Well, that's only part of the list. Well, where's the list? When I asked for the list explicitly, I was told, read the books. You'll find there. Just give me a simple list, and then we use a checklist. For example, one website here, I mistook you from another Chris from Michigan or North Dakota or whatever it was. I mistook you for someone else. You asked questions similar to that person's questions. I thought you were someone else. That's exactly what you're doing here. Okay, it's that simple. But anyway, Joe Matera will be on probably within the next few weeks. I said, by all means, listen to the discussion, and that should sort things out for you. But I do appreciate the call very much. 866-34-TRUTH. Let's go to Zach in Oregon. No, we won't go there. Let's go to Brian in Florida. Welcome to the Line of Fire.
Hello, Dr. Brown.
Hey, Brian.
Hi. My father is a homosexual Catholic, and I was wondering what resources you had that I could use to reach him.
Well, the best resource I have does not specifically address Catholicism, but all the biblical and spiritual arguments hold true. That's my book, Can You Be Gay and Christian? Can You Be Gay and Christian? You can get the book in numerous different formats. That would be the very best thing we have. If he's not a reader, or you don't think you'll be able to get him to read the book, just go to AskDrBrown.org, AskDrBrown.org, and type in Can You Be Gay and Christian? And you'll see videos where I've taught on that very subject, gone through what the scripture says, reached out with compassion. So the book, if he'll read, if he won't read it, you can read it and get educated. Can You Be Gay and Christian? Or if you won't read the book, maybe he'll sit down with you and watch the video, which is compassionate outreach and in which we base things on Scripture.
And do you know anything about the Catholic aspects? What resources are good for that?
Honestly, all of the resources that I'm aware of are just written for a general Christian audience. There are some, you can check out the website, People Can Change. I believe that's the name of it. And, there are Catholic organizations that specifically do outreach to LGBT community. Courage may be one of them. I'm not sure if they're still around. But you could, if you just search online, ex-gay Catholics, you'll probably find some organizations as well. There's nothing I know of specifically, just because that hasn't been a focus of mine. But if you'll search online for ex-gay Catholics, yep, sorry I can't help beyond that. All right, 866-34-TRUTH. Let's go to Steve in Manhattan. Thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Dr. Brown.
Hello.
Got a translation question.
Yeah.
In Romans 8:19-22, they use the word creation in most modern translations, but in the King James they use the word creature. I'm wondering, are these two different Greek words, or is it just the same word?
Right. So Romans 8:19, King James, the earnest expectation of the creature waited for the manifestation of the sons of God. New King James already changed that to creation, and then CSB, ESV, etc. So the first thing you know is if the New King James changed it, it's using the same Greek word. You have a textual variant that say maybe the ESV is using one Greek text and the King James was using a different Greek text, here and there on minor variants. So that's not the case here, because you already see the New King James changing creature to creation. And the Greek word in question, ktisis, can mean creature or it can mean creation. So it's something created. Are you talking about an animal? Are you talking about human beings? Are you talking about the entire world? So it's a matter of interpretation of the word. So it's the same word, just being interpreted differently.
Would that interpretation be based on the context that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So for example, I'm just looking at so here's something very interesting. I'm looking at the Aramaic translation called the Peshitta. All right, and the Peshitta has creation. When it's translated into Hebrew, it says creation. So I would read that I'm only seeing creation. If you go back to William Tyndale's translation, which preceded King James, he has creatures, plural. But contextually, in this context, it's not just talking about a creature, but creation in a wider sense. So it's all context that would determine that. And that's why overwhelmingly they go in the direction of creation.
All right. Can I pinpoint another word in that verse?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's in verse 23. When it talks about travail in pain,
yep.
In most modern translations, they translate that as childbirth. I'm wondering, is that the accurate underlying meaning?
23, where do you see travail?
I think it's when it talks about the expect.
So you mean 22, not 23. Right. Yeah, so groaneth and travaileth in pain. So it is talking about labor pains. In other words, King James, when it says travaileth in pain, it's talking about labor pains. So that's just Old English. It's saying the same thing there.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr.
Sure thing. You're very welcome. All right, 866-34-TRUTH. Let us go over to Sam in Utah. Welcome to the Line of Fire.
Hi, Michael Brown. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you.
Good. I have a question for you. Actually, a few. I've read a few places where Paul says that he's filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, it's only one place.
Obviously.
It's only one place. It's in Colossians, the first chapter, where he's talking about the persecution and suffering he's going through will fill up some of what's lacking in Christ's affliction. So he's obviously not talking about something was lacking at the cross. Paul preached the finished work of the gospel as clearly as anyone, and we don't have to you agree, we know that. When Jesus said it is finished, it was finished. However, There was a Jewish concept of the sufferings of the Messiah and the Messianic era, meaning that in association with the Messiah, there would be a season of great pain. Going back to the childbirth image that we just had a moment ago, so that those who are persecuted and suffering are joining in the larger sufferings of Messiah that are part of a larger aspect of God's world redemption. So the forgiveness of our sins paid for 100% in full at the cross, and nothing can be added to that. Then there is the ongoing suffering of the Messiah with his people in the world, these ongoing afflictions in which we participate with him in the redemption of the world. And that's what Paul is referring to there.
Okay, so anytime we suffer for the gospel or righteousness, we're filling up what's lacking in the sufferings of Christ?
Yeah, we are. If you can say that rightly without being misunderstood. And obviously Paul's audience knew what he was talking about. That's what it says, for example, in 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, right, where Peter is writing about the sufferings that the believers are going through there. And he says specifically, verse 12, don't be surprised at the fiery ordeal, right? Rejoice as you share in the sufferings of the Messiah. And that's why we'll share in his reward. If we suffer with him, we share in the reward. Now, we know that on a certain level. What Paul's saying, there's something in a larger redemptive part of that. And that's why John writes in Revelation, the 1st chapter, that I'm your companion in the kingdom and suffering and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus. This is part of our lot in him. But yes, we're joining with him in an ongoing way, suffering with him for the redemption of a dying world as co-workers. A great question. Thank you, sir. We'll get to other questions another day, all right? Hey friends, I want to take a moment to thank you for standing with us and show you firsthand where your funds have gone, the renovations, the upgrades to our studio, and what we've been able to accomplish with your help. Hey, come around here. I want you to see something. I don't think we've ever shown this before. So this is how things operate. All this brand new, just in recent months, recent weeks. Right there, big screen, as I can see what's happening that we need to be seeing. Over here are different clocks for radio, for different segments in time. Over here, this is, if we're putting things on live stream, you're going to see what I'm seeing right here. Over here, this is where I'm in contact with the rest of the radio studios. Calls come in, I interact over there. And right over there, you can see where there's a second camera. That will be used when we have guests in studio so that we can get everyone on camera. Right now, we haven't been able to do that, but we're going to be able to do that. This is also going to enable us to have different angles as we do Skype videos and Skype debates. But let me show you some of the most exciting stuff. Hey, come this way. All right, I want you to meet Caleb. Caleb is our video, audio, computer tech expert. He's new here. He's only part-time. We need him here full-time. We are now able to do our daily live stream of our radio show. So you're watching it on video. You're hearing an audio clip on the radio. You're watching a video on YouTube. Something happens in the news, boom, they're on. We've got high-tech equipment. Pull it up, put it on the screen. I can talk about it, read it to you as you're watching at home. It's amazing. And we now have new equipment that's going to enable me on the road to do high-quality live stream of my radio show in America, even in other countries. And oh, we've got a big gap here. We need a major new computer. Not only will it enable us to get things out even more quickly, so if something happens in the news, you're frustrated out. What does Dr. Brown have to say? No problem. We got it covered within minutes. It's up, it's out. But we need this for post-production as well. We need one more person sitting here. If you can believe it, the 1,000+ videos that we have out, plus we record in there from the Ask Me Anything broadcast for God TV and the NRB TV Line of Fire broadcast, recorded right in there in our studio. We do all of that with me and 1.5 employees. We need to add Caleb full-time. We need one more person in here. We need that computer. With that, friends, the sky is the limit for what we can put out. We are your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Help us amplify your voice. Together we're making a difference. A generation is being impacted. So
Your one-time gift goes a long way, really, in helping us advance this Jesus revolutionary cause, and we'll be back with more updates as they happen.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Get into the Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
You know what's really cool? It's to look at my screen and see calls from Canada, Ireland, and then all over the country here in America. I can't tell you how much joy I have being with you on these broadcasts. I wish we had hours and hours where I could sit and answer your questions. But we're going to be launching an online leadership forum. We'll be telling you more about that in the days ahead. Where once a month, I'll get with leaders and leaders in the making, do a special webinar training. Folks can register for that. And it's like going to a special class, except focused on the things I can impart to leaders. But whatever we can do to answer your questions and be of help to you, it's our joy. 866-34-TRUTH. You've got questions. We've got answers. Well, let's go to Ireland. Kyle, welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, Dr. Brown, it's great to talk to you. We love you over here. And I had a question about the Septuagint. I have really enjoyed reading the Old Testament in the English translation of the Septuagint. Mm-hmm. And, of course, you know, what's your thoughts, the fact that most of the New Testament draws from the Greek Septuagint versus the modern X? I mean, people just say it was the language of the day. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes. So the New Testament writers, when they're quoting scripture, primarily quote the Septuagint because they're writing in Greek, right? So when I'm writing a book, unless I'm doing a commentary on the book and providing my own translation of a book of the Old Testament, otherwise I'm just quoting from a different English version. And let's say we had the King James and the RSV. Those are the only two versions we have in English. So as I'm writing, unless I'm going to freshly translate the Hebrew and the Greek, I'm going to quote from the version that most of the people have access to. So if everybody had the King James, that's what I'm quoting from. So that's what the New Testament writers did. And again, this was a translation widely used in the ancient Jewish world. And here and there, it'll vary from the Hebrew text in different ways. But unless it was seen to wrench the meaning, then that's what was used. Now, here and there, for example, Matthew deviates from the Septuagint. For example, in Matthew 8, he translates from Isaiah 53 straight from the Hebrew rather than using the Septuagint. Paul, in some of his quotations, seems to modify the Septuagint. Maybe he's bringing other verses together, or he's not entirely happy with the translation. But otherwise, that was the Bible that people had access to. So if I'm quoting scripture to you, let's say the only English Bible that you have access to is the King James, and I quote scripture to you, and I use my own translation, you're thinking, I don't see that. I don't see that. My Bible says thus and such. So that's what's being used. And as careful as the authors were to look at every word, it also reminds us that ultimately it's the overall spirit and sense of it, and not necessarily parsing every grammatical detail that they were looking for.
That's an excellent answer. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome.
Pray for Ireland. We're in the middle of a big fight for pro-life here.
I know.
And so pray for us. We appreciate that.
Yeah, massive battle.
You.
You've got a great pro-life history. A shame, a terrible shame to see it change now. Thanks for the love from Ireland, 866-34-TRUTH. Let us go to Canada. Mehdi, where exactly in Canada are you?
Hi, Dr. Brown. This is Mehdi. I'm MBB background from Middle East. I'm pastoring a church in Georgetown, Ontario.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question in regards to Messianic Jewish people. Who are these guys? And I have a friend who used to be my neighbor and who's always challenging me and sending me emails that you have to be grafted into Israel and you need to go to Saturday instead of Sunday. Who are these people, if you can just explain to us?
Yes, sir. So these people make up a broad spectrum, some of them being people like me, some of them being people who are like those that you're encountering. Broadly speaking, a Messianic Jew is a Jewish believer in Jesus. Specifically, a Messianic Jew can mean a Jewish believer who attends a Messianic congregation and who continues to live as a Jew, not for the purpose of salvation, but just like Paul and Peter did. They lived as Jews. They participated in the life of their people. In other words, following Jesus does not mean you stop being a Jew. You will not practice all the Jewish traditions, but it's not like leaving Islam or leaving Hinduism, that you can be a former Muslim or a former Hindu. I'm not a former Jew. I'm a Jewish believer in Jesus. So there are many Messianic Jews around the world. There are probably several 100,000 of us that are sound believers in all the orthodox fundamental doctrines. Everything that you would hold to as fundamental, we would hold to as fundamental. And many would say the New Testament never changed the Sabbath to Sunday, so we still observe the seventh-day Sabbath. We don't see the institution of new holy days, so we celebrate the death and resurrection of Jesus within the context of Passover. But this is not for our justification. We don't do these things for justification. That comes by grace through faith. There are others who go to extremes that say everybody is required to observe the Torah. Everybody is required to observe the seventh-day Sabbath. Everybody is required to observe the dietary laws. And if you're not, you're in disobedience to God. So that's the fringe group that goes way too far. And some of them actually go completely out of the faith. That's the fringe. The great majority of Messianic congregations you'll find to be fellow believers in Jesus the Messiah, believe in his death and resurrection and deity. And it's just like in the early church, sir, there were different groups. There were the Ebionites and the Corinthians, not Corinthians, but Corinthians. These were Jewish followers of Jesus who had some heretical beliefs. And then there were the Nazarenes who held to all the fundamental Orthodox beliefs, but continued to live as Jews. And they existed for centuries and centuries in the early church. And it's just a matter of Jewish believers reattaching themselves to their biblical New Testament roots. And it's a very healthy and positive thing. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Brian. So in short, these guys are the extremist guys that they follow the the Jewish Sabbath, Jewish dietary.
Well, no, the extremist
like
is saying it's required for everybody. In other words, for me, if I'm not on the road traveling, Sabbath is Saturday for me. That's my day of rest, before the Lord, and I prefer celebrating the death and resurrection of Jesus within the Passover as opposed to a separate holiday separated from the Jewish calendar. But that's not a matter of salvation. That's not a matter of being right with God or not right with God. The extremists are people like this guy that are harassing you and telling you as a non-Jew that you must do these things or something's wrong. May I encourage you, sir, to get a book by Dan Juster, Juster, Dan Juster, called Jewish Roots. It's been a classic for many years, and I think it will give understanding. He's a leading theologian and great heart for the whole church. Dan Juster, Juster, Jewish Roots. All right? Hey, God bless you. Thank you, sir, for the call. 866-34-TRUTH. Let's go over to Sacramento, California. Antonio, welcome to the Line of Fire. Are you there? Antonio.
I'm here.
Yeah,
Can you
okay.
hear me, Dr. Brown?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can
go
you hear
ahead.
me, Dr. Brown?
Yes.
Thanks for taking my call, and thanks for being a blessing in my life over the last few years.
Sure thing.
Question. So I'm in Sacramento, California. I'm an African-American, conservative, spirit-filled Christian. We just had a situation with the killing of Stephen Clark and other social issues going on across the country, from the Starbucks arrest, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen a lot of articles on my Facebook timeline from my very dedicated, reformed, evangelical people I follow, including your friend and somebody I respect, Dr. James White. And there are all these articles about and against social justice. And I'm having a hard time reconciling how some of these issues aren't biblical. And for example, when we celebrate Martin Luther King, I'll see articles that bring up his moral failure, which we all know, as if the Bible isn't clear of examples of David, of how God can still use people with moral failures. Or they'll talk about how, his doctrine wasn't all the way. And as an African-American, I'm looking at this, I'm like, wow, we're going to look at how God used him to bring great change in this country, but you're going to ignore that from 1619 until 1968 legally, and then still past that. everybody in this country was Christian, and a lot of people were Reformed,
Yes, sir.
and they had great theological doctrine, but yet they supported slavery, black codes, Jim Crow, legal discrimination. So I'm just torn by the angst
Yeah.
I hear from them going against social justice as if it's not biblical.
Yeah,
I
so
just wanted your opinion because I know you're in both worlds, so I wanted to see what
yeah,
you thought about that.
absolutely. And thank you for sharing it. And thank you for the heart with which you shared it. I know Dr. White had interacted with me. He was concerned about a conference that was held, an evangelical conference that was supposed to focus on social justice that he felt went to various extremes. And I know that he was feeling the need to confront that as opposed to stand together for justice. But that's all I can say in terms of speaking for him. I just know we interacted privately a little and I hadn't followed the conference. But let me talk more broadly. What's happening is there is a reaction against the reaction, meaning, and there's no excuse for it. We have to do better. Okay. But here's what I mean. You have, say, Black Lives Matter. So of course, if someone is shot down in cold blood, of course, if there's an overreaction, of course, the Philando Castile thing and how that happened, and you know, would that have happened if it was a white man in the car saying, I have a gun and trying to, you know, do things the right way? Would he have been shot dead? I think there should be an outrage. I think there should be concern. My African-American callers over the years really educated me to a lot of things that I didn't grow up with. I've never been racially profiled. I've never had to deal with these kinds of issues. And they were God-fearing people, people who loved the Lord, people who loved authority. And they were telling me, look, we have to teach our kids. You got to be extra careful. Otherwise, you get shot. So they're not making this up. In other words, it's not just urban myth. This is their experience. But then you have, say, the Black Lives Matter movement, funded by radical leftists, led by people with really, many of them, horrific ideologies, now calling for violence against police, you know, some of them doing that, and then, say, using my namesake, Michael Brown, as the poster boy, whereas as far as we know, the whole thing was a myth, you know, the hands up, don't shoot. So you have the one side, the Black Lives Matter swinging too extreme. Then you have this white conservative reaction the other way. And instead, we don't deal with the real issues. We don't look. Last night, I saw this report late last night about an African-American man, father of three, with a woman and others in a car at Walmart, and police got a call about a suspicious vehicle. And then they claimed the vehicle started driving towards them, and they shot it 30 times. The guy was killed. The woman was seriously injured. And then the lawyer said, "What are you talking about? They weren't driving toward. They weren't attacking anyone. Look at the video." So I posted the article, and I said, "Is there any justification for what these officers did? If not, what a horrible tragedy. Either way, may the truth come to light. May justice be done." I immediately wanted folks on my Facebook page to say, "Hey, I'm sensitive to these issues. We don't know the facts yet. So stay there. I'll try to bring this to a clear conclusion on the other side. But thank you for calling. You raise a legitimate concern about a blind spot here." Have you ever heard it said there's no such thing as an atheist, that no real atheist exists, that everybody really knows there's a God? Well, I don't agree with that. And my wife, Nancy, who was an atheist when we met at 19 and a hardcore atheist at that, had been ever since she was maybe 8 years old. She absolutely takes offense in that statement. Now, if you mean scientifically, that it's impossible to prove the non-existence of God and therefore you cannot scientifically demonstrate that. Okay, that's another subject. But are there people who sincerely and genuinely in the heart of hearts do not believe that there is a God, that there's anything beyond the material realm? Certainly. Do some of them hate the God they deny? Exodus chapter 20, verse 5. Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, in the Ten Commandments, God speaks about the idols. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. So, yes, there are some people who hate God. They see who he is, they see what he stands for, they believe he's real, and they hate him. There are others that deny his existence, but act as if they hate him. You know, the summary of many of the new atheist books, the Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens books, the best summary of some of them is, there is no God and I hate him. So there are some people who hate what this God stands for, or hate what they believe this God has done in the name of religion, or hate the God of the Old Testament, but they deny his existence. So that's an interesting thing. But there are other atheists that simply, intellectually or experientially, don't believe there's a God. And they don't go around hostile and angry towards him all the time. That's a fact. And there are others, and I want to appeal to this, who I believe have a very high and lofty view of God and think that if this God existed, who was so good, who was so perfect, who was so powerful, he couldn't possibly...
Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Hey, folks, mark this on your calendar. Unless there's major breaking news I feel I need to cover or the Lord really burdens me with something over the weekend, I'm going to do an extra You've Got Questions, We've Got Answers broadcast on Monday. So everyone that's been on hold today, try to get through early Monday. We'll try to put you towards the top of the queue. If we don't get to your call today, keep trying. We do our best to get to as many calls as possible, but obviously answer with substance. So, Antonio, I see a few things happening. One is many times we're not sensitive to issues going on. When I say we, I mean anybody, because I didn't live in your world, you didn't live in my world, etc. And then when you see, say, for example, stats being used and an argument being raised about Black Americans being shot more readily than white Americans, then you say Heather McDonald comes on with her book on the war against cops and actually says statistically a Black officer is more likely to fire against a Black suspect than a white officer, and the statistics go against the narrative. And then the Michael Brown thing's put forward, rather than saying, okay, that appears not to be accurate, but why do so many African Americans feel that they're not getting a fair shake? Why have so many been racially profiled? Why are these things in the news? Can we deal with that? And unfortunately, we do a bad job of it. It's just we go to one extreme or the other. You have the radical left, social justice warrior, and then the conservative right, pushing against that instead of saying, all right, let's meet in the middle and talk about lives and the evil of segregation and these things. It's I was watching a basketball game, Chill, the other day. It was an NCAA game, and they were showing a picture of a guy in the stands, an African-American player, and they talked about the groundbreaking role he had because the rule was you could only have 2 Black players on a team. I'm thinking, what in the world? What kind of world did we live in? And it's pretty recent. I didn't grow up with it in New York City. I had Black friends. I went to mixed schools. My second organ teacher was a Black man married to a white woman. I just didn't grow up with it personally. It's like, wow, this was more recent and more pervasive than a lot of us realize. So unfortunately, we react one extreme against another, and we got to do better. I'm trying.
Can I ask you this?
Yeah.
So, for example, you bring up Michael Brown and such, and I think because that was such a big deal and it got a lot of media coverage, but as you know, there's many more instances of names that didn't get the big time media coverage because there wasn't a protest or a riot associated with it.
Yes.
So, and I grew up in Sacramento, California, very diverse. I grew up with Black, white, every Mexican type of friends. I go to a diverse church, so I see it, and my Facebook timeline is filled with liberals and conservatives. So I see what happens during these events, just like you do when you post things. You see both sides of people's opinions.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me because a lot of the people who write these articles, I follow them. I look up to Dr. White. I look to these people.
Yeah.
But I'm like, wow, there's not a single incident where the cop was wrong. There's not a single incident where there wasn't some racism involved. And it's funny because it's like I talk to my grandma who's from Mississippi, and I'm like, wow, she can tell me all kinds of stories. And I've been telling people, like, I get you may be tired of hearing us protest, but as a culture, we had to go through drama for 360-something years. It's only really been 45, 50 years since we've legally been on the same playing field.
So a very small slice of the overall history, a very small slice.
Yeah. Very small size. And for people to think everything's okay, and I'll say this because I'm in Sacramento, so I was front row. I didn't protest, but I had a lot of friends down there. I watched what was going on. All I had to do was look at the Facebook live streams from the local news channel, and that enough proved to me racism still exists. The comments people were making about what they perceived, and I'm like, wow, people think we're post-racial? I don't think so. And so I guess my heart is, as a Christian who goes to a multicultural church, who believes in unity in the Spirit of God, and knows that in Revelation it says, at the end, all tribes, nations, and tongues will be at the throne. How is it there's such a blind spot from my fellow Christians when it comes to these racial issues? Yet they don't have the blind spot if it had to deal with something overseas.
Yeah,
over
so
any other
my
subject.
default is I have lots of blind spots. That's my default.
Mhm.
And you don't know them because you don't know them. So
Right.
there are things I'll die for. There are hills I'll die for, and I'm examining them from every angle. And I'm convicted before God. And if I'm wrong on that, I'm wrong. You know what I'm saying
Yeah.
about God and
Mhm.
His Word. And yet to think that I always have the right perspective. Look, I am not a right wing conservative politically. I am biblically based conservative, which then leads to voting in conservative ways based on certain life values. But I don't just check off the list at all. You know, I may be in harmony, I may not. So there is the kind of the political right and the political left. So here's what happens. Donald Trump gets attacked for his past and whatever, his sexual infidelities, alleged or real. Okay, he gets attacked for that. So now someone's going to push back. Well, you're talking about Martin Luther King. It's like, can we grow up? I've appreciated
Right.
Dr. King for years. I've quoted him for years, and whatever failings he had or whatever weakness in theology, God knows I'm quoting him as a revolutionary leader with admirable tactics, etc. And whatever his secret life was, that's between him and God. That may have hurt him in different ways. Who knows? I mean, the FBI wanted to always blackmail him over that. But to me, he's a champion and a hero. And it's not that I overlook the other things. I'm not looking to him in that regard. And with Donald Trump, my big issue is not what he did in the past, because I didn't think he was a Christian. That's who I thought he was, you know, playboy,
Right.
narcissist. My big issue is how you handling yourself as president. You know, what kind of person are you as president? How are you, you know, so anyway, the thing to do though, is what you're doing. Don't you be reactionary. You try to hold that holy tension of asking questions on both sides with people you respect. And look, I get blasted because we'll post a meme to get a certain point, and the memes are posted by my team members, you know, to get a certain point across. Well, that may not be as nuanced as we would have done it. And next thing you see how much division's out there, and you know how much racism there's on all sides. I mean, black hatred of whites and white hatred of black and Asian hatred of Hispanics, and you know, it's all around. So somehow we have to lead the way. And I'll say this last thing. My generation, when we were growing up, it was all peace and love, you know, peace, man, the whole hippie dream and all this. And we went about it the wrong way. Although we had some good ideals and good values, we went about it the wrong way, and it ended up being very corrupt, very destructive. So the younger generation today, they're all about equality and justice. And what the church needs to say is there are a lot of good things you're after, but you're going about them the wrong way. Here's the right way to approach them. But thank you for the call, and let's keep praying that all of us will step higher and within the Lord come together for the good of a sick nation. Thank you, sir, for the call. 866-34-TRUTH. Yeah, and correct. A meme by definition is not nuanced. So you want a nuanced statement, read my articles, listen to the broadcast, read my books, watch the videos. You want a blast of a statement, check out the meme. All right, let us go to, in Eagle, Idaho, CJ. Welcome to the Line of Fire.
Thank you for taking my call, Dr. Brown.
You bet.
I want to make clear real quick, just because I know that you obviously can only speak for yourself. And you, part of my experience in generating this question comes from listening to multiple different apologists, and I don't want you to have to answer for any of them. But I seem to hear consistently, whether I'm listening to charismatic circles or Calvinist circles or Baptist circles, or even some of the more, extreme circles like Steven Anderson, everybody seems to be agreeing on things like oneness being a cultic idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems strange to me, because I've always thought that, if we all agree that there's one God, Jesus is God, the Holy Spirit is God, and the Father is God, then that shouldn't, our interpretation of what how exactly he is that God shouldn't define whether or not we're a cult. And I was just wondering if you might have any.
Yeah, I feel, as a Jew, I fully understand that emphasis. I've had oneness people say, come on, you're a Jew. We believe in one God. Shouldn't you be happy with that? I've looked at it sometimes the way that you have as well, saying, hey, I've met oneness people that in every way seem to hold to certain fundamentals of the faith, just express them differently. But would you agree that if someone says that the Son of God is not eternal, that is outside of the pale of the biblical faith. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that would have to be, because it says that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it says that he was with God creating the heavens and laying the foundations of the earth.
So Jehovah's Witnesses outright say he's a created being. So we agree that's a cult. What Dr. White has pointed out to me, because I've never examined oneness beliefs in real detail, had minor debates, but unfortunately haven't focused on it in detail, that they actually don't believe in the eternal nature of the Son, but rather, and I'm going to misstate it, but that this was a manifestation or a personality that he took on at a certain point in time, so that it's, the way the oneness people would explain it, that you may be a police officer wearing a uniform and you come home and you kiss your wife, now you're a husband, then your kids come and hug you, now you're a father, but you're just one person. Whereas we actually believe that Jesus had communion with his Father, John 17, before the world began, that the Father sent the Son and the Son sent the Spirit, and therefore we're talking about three distinct persons within the Trinity. So to deny that would be considered denial of a fundamental of the faith. So 1 John 2, that says whoever has the Son has the Father also. Dr. White would say that by the oneness definition, they don't have the Son because they don't believe in this eternal Son. So listen, CJ, I'm out of time. I hope that's helpful. But again, look at the language. Read John 14, 15, 16, 17, and ask if a oneness person can truly believe what's written there without changing fundamental meanings. And that's what happens in a cult-like setting with the fundamentals. Hey, friends, we are out of time. Join me on my website over the weekend. Check out a key article on there today about California. Will they burn books next? AskDrBrown.org.